Bhutan, Himalayan kingdom life rooted in faith and family. "900 meters above Paro, a monastery rebuilt after fire remains active in daily worship. Yet Bhutan preserves identity less through monuments than through routines inside ordinary homes. Public rules can preserve formal dress, but they cannot make a child value it. The harder work begins before sunrise. Cloth fastened for the day, rice set over heat, butter lamps lit, and prayers spoken where children can hear them. In Bhutan, faith moves through the house, the field, the school, and the dzong, binding private duty to public life. I want to understand how those repeated acts withstand roads, screens, tourism, and the pull of a faster world. In this film, we trace that strength across Bhutan and neighboring mountain cultures and test where cultural continuity is actually built. Government, monastic life, and family ritual still meet inside a fortress once built to control Paro Valley. Developed in the 17th century, Taktsang Dzong combines thick walls and timber galleries with government offices, monastic quarters, temples, and courtyards. Its position above the Paro Chu once controlled movement through the valley, while its mass gave government and religion one commanding address. That dual purpose continues. District administrators and a monastic community still occupy different parts of the fortress, sharing one structure without collapsing their roles. Below, the covered wooden Nyamaizam bridge forms both a practical crossing and a ceremonial approach. Movement into the dzong is shaped before the walls begin. Each year, the Paro Tsechu changes the precinct into a dense public stage. Masked dances, religious performances, and a large sacred textile draw families in formal dress. Here, clothes are not costume, and attendance is not passive display. Family practice enters the courtyard and becomes visible cultural duty. The arrangement rises again on the ridge above. Taktsang Dzong, a circular watchtower built to protect the fortress from higher ground, now houses the National Museum. Since the late 1960s, that former lookout has held national memory rather than watched access. Inside are ritual objects, painted religious scrolls, textiles, household tools, natural history specimens, and material from Bhutan's regional cultures. The collection links temple practice to domestic work. Bridge and river lie below. The working fortress occupies the middle. The former watchtower holds the ridge. This vertical design records how Paro joined movement, worship, administration, and protection. Daily family practice gives Paro's great walls their living strength. Bhutan's spiritual heartland is not one valley, but 4 working valleys held together by chores. Chokho, Tang, Ura, and Chum bind 7th century sacred history to buckwheat fields, dairy sheds, looms, and roads that pull younger workers toward larger towns. The temples carry the public weight. Jambe Lakang is traditionally linked to the 7th century Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo, giving worship here a reach beyond the household. At Kurje Lahakang, a cave associated with Guru Rinpoche and a rock said to hold his body's imprint, turn faith into physical evidence. Tamshing Lahakang adds another layer. Pema Lingpa founded it around the start of the 16th century, anchoring an influential Bhutanese religious lineage. Yet monuments alone cannot preserve Bumthang. I keep returning to the smaller discipline. Families planting barley and potatoes, tending cattle, and turning buckwheat into noodles and pancakes. Milk becomes butter and cheese. Apples move from orchard to market, while seasonal work fixes the household calendar more firmly than any slogan. In Chum, Yathra wool is patterned on household and workshop looms. Skill survives because hands repeat it, cloth earns money, and dress remains a duty rather than a display. Ura holds its compact village form among fields and grazing land. That closeness makes shared labor practical, but it also exposes every empty house and every missing farm worker. Better roads open markets, schools, and healthcare. The same asphalt shortens the route out, while changing diets and costly house repairs weaken routines that once renewed themselves. Festivals and temple maintenance answer that pressure in public. Brewing, weaving, dairy work, and seasonal planting answer it at home, one obligation at a time. Bumthang's beauty carries a cost. Every empty house or unused loom leaves its temples with less daily life to gather and sustain. Bhutan's most famous sacred image depends on an ordinary working valley below. Taktsang clings to a cliff roughly 900 meters above Paro, at more than 3,000 meters, while farms spread across the basin beneath it. The Paro Chu follows fields of rice and buckwheat, passing timber-framed farmhouses where high-altitude crops turn mountain soil into household security. This matters because faith here is not sealed inside monastery walls. It is supported by planting crops, maintaining homes, and making time for pilgrimage. Tradition holds that Guru Rinpoche reached the cliff in the 8th century on a tigris and meditated in caves now enclosed by temples. The principal buildings took shape in the late 17th century, with the work associated with Tenzin Rabgyi. Building on this rock face meant controlling gravity, weather, and isolation. The pilgrimage makes that struggle physical again. The route climbs pine switchbacks, reaches a tea house and viewpoint, drops past a waterfall, then rises by steps toward the chapels. Prayer flags, incense, butter lamps, and clockwise movement show what the postcard cannot. Taktsang remains a place of disciplined worship. A major fire damaged the complex in 1998. Its careful reconstruction in traditional forms did more than restore buildings. It restored the setting in which practice continues. What strikes me is the division of labor between valley and cliff. Farms keep households rooted. The monastery gathers that private discipline into a public act. Roads and tourism can accelerate Paro, but neither can preserve its identity by appearance alone. Continuity requires worked fields, climbed paths, lit lamps, and repaired walls. Paro sets the terms for the journey ahead. Bhutan's public symbols endure only while ordinary people still choose the work beneath them. At nearly 4,000 meters, an ordinary road crosses a ridge where wind, ice, and cloud can overrule every timetable. Chele is one of Bhutan's highest road-accessible passes, binding the cultivated Paro Valley to Haa across a severe Himalayan divide. The ascent compresses several mountain zones into a single journey. Blue pine gives way to fir, rhododendron, alpine grass, and low scrub. That change is not decorative. Altitude controls what grows, how hard engines work, how long the crossing takes, and whether movement continues at all. At the crest, dense lines of prayer flags take the full force of the wind. They are raised for well-being and to build merit. This matters because the pass is not merely a lookout. Residents, public vehicles, traders, and visitors depend on it to move between two western valleys. The road has narrow bends, little shoulder, falling rock, and almost no roadside support. Every vehicle must trade speed for control. Winter snow and ice can slow the route or close it for a time. Fog can reduce a mountain crossing to a few careful meters. A clear horizon can disappear within minutes, taking Jomalhari and every distant queue with it. In suitable seasons, yak herders and grazing animals use the high meadows. Their work places livelihood inside the same exposed terrain as prayer. Below the ridge, footpaths descend toward Kilagoenpa, an isolated cliffside nunnery. The road carries traffic overhead. Religious discipline holds to the slope below. I see Chele as a test of what continuity really requires. Faith cannot remain ceremonial when weather, distance, and work keep pressing against it. On Chele, continuity is not permanence. It is the decision to make the necessary crossing again under altered conditions. A river used for gentler rafting performs the hardest work in Punakha. The Mochu descends through the valley and meets the Pochu beside Punakha Dzong, joining recreation, irrigated fields, and a strategic fortress at one confluence. Their names are commonly read as the female and male rivers. Their meeting gave the Dzong both a strong strategic position and a symbolic place in the valley. Yet the Mochu is no ceremonial backdrop. It carries water and sediment across the valley, supports irrigation, and helps keep Punakha's farmland productive. That work reaches households through fields, food, and shared labor. Daily tradition holds because river water keeps fieldwork tied to the same ground. Commercial rafting makes that force physical. The Mo Chu is generally gentler than the Po Chu, but water level and season can change the route. Before launch, guides check helmets, buoyancy vests, paddles, boat pressure, passenger spacing, rocks, and strainers. Recreation begins with discipline, not spectacle. Commands must be immediate and clear. Even a moderate rapid can rotate a raft or press it toward the bank, turning hesitation into immediate physical risk. Between rapids, the river's larger work becomes clear. Water feeds rice fields, moves sediment, divides settlements, and shapes transport routes around the valley. Then the monsoon changes the terms. After intense rain or upstream flooding, banks erode, channels shift, and launch points can become unsafe. Operators adjust or cancel when conditions push beyond safe limits. That decision respects the same force that waters farms and tests every structure near the confluence. The current that feeds Punakha can also overrun it. Living beside the Mo Chu means reading its force and knowing when not to launch. A valley that looks almost empty must manage every wire, wheel, dog, and footstep. At roughly 3,000 meters, Phobjikha shelters wintering black-necked cranes while farms, grazing, roads, and tourism press against the same wet ground. The birds arrive each autumn from breeding areas on the Tibetan Plateau. They feed and roost in marshes and dwarf bamboo, then return north in late winter or early spring. Distance hides the valley's fragility. Drainage, new buildings, loose dogs, traffic, and overhead wires can disturb habitat that appears unused. Conservation, therefore, enters the machinery of daily life. Parts of the electrical network were buried underground to reduce collision risk, rather than force wildlife around infrastructure. Boardwalks and marked trails channel feet away from wet ground. The Conservation Center monitors cranes and explains migration, turning protection into a task that residents and visitors can understand. Above the basin, Gangti Monastery gives that practical work public meaning. Local tradition describes cranes circling the monastery as they arrive or depart. Families still need income. Potatoes, cattle, grazing, forestry, lodges, guides, cafes, and homestays all draw value from land that cannot absorb unlimited pressure. The annual Crane Festival brings attention and revenue during a sensitive season. Its success, therefore, depends on controlling traffic, waste, and the reach of crowds. There is no easy answer. Phobjikha cannot be protected by removing households, and livelihoods cannot be defended by treating the marsh as spare land. Power lines, paths, fields, grazing, and prayer are adjusted around one another. Identity survives here as disciplined coexistence, enforced through household choices and strengthened on Gangte's ridge. The cranes will return only if households, businesses, and visitors keep accepting limits before the valley imposes harsher ones. Change reaches Haa only after the road climbs nearly 4,000 meters. West of Paro, close to Bhutan's high frontier with Tibet, Haa remained closed to international tourists until 2002. Chele controls the approach. The road strains through forest to the high pass, then drops toward the Haa-Chu pasture and worked fields. That barrier slowed outside traffic, but it never froze the valley in time. Families still measure the year through barley, wheat, buckwheat, potatoes, cattle, and yaks. The traditional house is not scenery. Thick earthen or stone walls, painted timber windows, enclosed courtyards, grain stores, and livestock space turn one building into the working core of family life. The same discipline reaches beyond the household. Lakang Karpo and Lakang Nagpo, the White Temple and Black Temple, are tied to local foundation legends and still gather worship and annual ritual. What strikes me is the division of labor. Homes carry belief through meals, farm work, and family duty. The temples give those private habits a public center. Haa is not sealed from the present. Forest products, farming, military jobs, public services, and limited tourism now share the economic load. Better roads cut travel time to Paro and Thimphu. Markets and schools move closer, while homestays and guiding become more viable. Access also pulls in the opposite direction. Young residents can leave more easily, and cheaper modern construction can replace houses built around older patterns of work. The valley's strength rests less on distance than on repetition. Fields worked, animals moved, stores filled, prayers renewed, and family duties carried inside thick walls. Haa makes tradition a living discipline, not preserved decoration. Between Punakha's two rivers, water gives the dzong its power and its recurring threat. Founded in the late 1630s, Punakha Dzong occupies the meeting of the Pochu and Mochu, the male and female rivers. Jabdrung Ngawang Namgyal raised it during Bhutan's political and religious unification. Thick white walls, enclosed courtyards, tiered roofs, carved windows, and a tall central tower made authority physical. This was never only a defensive shell. Administrative offices and monastic spaces shared one enclosure, binding civil rule to religious discipline. Its name means Palace of Great Happiness. Punakha became the country's principal seat of government, and the first hereditary king was crowned here in 1907. The capital later shifted permanently to Thimphu, but the dzong did not become an empty relic. Each year, the warmer winter climate draws Bhutan's central monastic body and the Jakhenpo, its chief abbot, from Thimphu to Punakha. Monastic life therefore moves with season, altitude, and temperature. Beyond the walls, the same warmth shapes household work. Rice fields, citrus, and bananas support villages in ways the colder valleys cannot. Food is not a decorative detail in this story. Crops decide labor, meals, and the duties that families repeat across generations. The rivers make this fertility possible, yet floods have repeatedly exposed the fortress. Fire and earthquakes have also demanded repair, making preservation a recurring duty. The answer stands in rebuilt walls, wooden bridges, and embankments. This is engineering as cultural defense. Stone and timber hold a public shape against moving water. Monks, officials, farmers, and visitors share this ground. If households stop working the warm valley, or the rivers breach the rebuilt walls, the dzong loses more than masonry. It loses the living system that gives it meaning. One of Bhutan's longest footbridges carries far more than people. It carries school, fieldwork, worship, and family duty across open water. For roughly 160 meters, a narrow deck hangs above the Po-Chu, linking the Dzong side with villages, fields, and walking routes on the opposite bank. Without this crossing, an ordinary journey can stretch toward a vehicle bridge or a safer ford. In mountain terrain, infrastructure decides whether school, work, prayer, and home remain close. Steel cables pull against anchors, and the deck flexes under footsteps and valley gusts. When several people cross together, the entire span can sway. Hundreds of prayer flags are fastened to those cables. Faith is not confined to a shrine. It occupies the same crossing used by farmers, monks, school children, and families. Those flags also catch the wind and increase the load on an exposed structure. Here, engineering must carry a public expression of belief without interrupting daily movement. Cable tension, anchors, decking, and flag attachments all need inspection. Weather works at every joint, while repeated foot traffic wears the crossing one step at a time. Below, the Po-Chu changes with the season. It runs clearer and lower in dry periods, then presses harder and grows louder under the summer monsoon. What strikes me is the bridge's plain bargain. Maintain the cables, and the routines on both banks can continue. Around Punakha, distance is measured not only in kilometers, but in current, elevation, weather, and the condition of a connection. The Punakha Suspension Bridge proves Bhutan's strength at household scale. Faith, family duty, and shared upkeep cross the river together every ordinary day. A national park larger than 4,000 square kilometers is also a workplace, a transport corridor, and a home. Jigme Dorji National Park rises from warm forest to glaciers and summits above 7,000 meters, with Gasa and highland communities living inside its protected boundary. That vertical reach compresses whole climates into one protected area. Takin, red panda, blue sheep, Himalayan black bear, and snow leopard occupy different levels, many of them rarely seen. But conservation here cannot mean removing human use. Communities such as Laya depend on yak herding, livestock products, trade, tourism, and regulated seasonal collection of cordyceps fungus. Snow decides the calendar. Grass growth and monsoon conditions decide when herds move between grazing grounds, tying household income to the mountain's shifting limits. Roads do not reach every settlement. Residents, horses, pack animals, and trekkers still load the trails, so food and household supplies must cross steep ground by muscle. Long routes, including sections of the difficult snowman trek, expose the hidden workforce behind every crossing. Guides, cooks, animal handlers, people who maintain bridges, and supply carriers. Gasa Dzong occupies a ridge that once watched the northern approaches. Nearby hot springs draw Bhutanese visitors and trekkers, bringing domestic travel and trekking into the same hard terrain. The central fact is easy to miss. This park is inhabited. Its rules must balance grazing, forest use, medicinal plants, predators, waste, and tourism income rather than protect an empty map. That balance now faces a larger pressure. Warming temperatures and changing snowfall affect water, pasture, glaciers, and the stability of high roots. Gasa holds wildlife, trade, family duty, and labor on these slopes. Tradition survives because households and institutions carry that weight together. A heavily traveled Himalayan trail ends at a passage that must be rebuilt across moving ice. From Lukla, the approach climbs through Namche Bazar, Tengbochi, Dingboch, Lobuch, and Gorak Shep to Everest Base Camp, about 5,300 meters high. That distance gives the body time to adjust as oxygen thins. Rest days and a slower climb reduce, but cannot erase acute mountain sickness. Lower down, ridges of broken rock can look like solid ground. Active glacier still moves beneath that debris, grinding and shifting under every route choice. Above base camp, the Khumbu icefall breaks into towers, blocks, and deep crevasses. Here, mountaineering depends on construction as much as strength. Each season, the icefall doctors fix ropes and lay aluminum ladders across open gaps. Their work turns fractured ice into a temporary road. Temporary is the critical word. The glacier keeps moving, so a usable line may bend or close overnight, while avalanches and collapsing ice remain beyond control. Sherpa guides and high-altitude workers enter this terrain before summit teams. They carry loads, stock camps, manage oxygen, and cross the icefall again and again. The ladder crossing is therefore not a stunt. It is the visible edge of acclimatization, paid labor, route engineering, and repeated judgment under brutal pressure. Most of the summit's preparation happens outside the frame. Measured pace, secured loads, and work repeated far below. Warming now thins and pulls back the Khumbu Glacier, changing paths, meltwater, and conditions around base camp. The route builders must answer a landscape that refuses to hold still. The mountain does not preserve this passage. Skilled workers rebuild it while warming ice keeps changing the terms. Thousands of red homes were packed across a frozen valley for one reason: to keep Buddhist teaching within walking distance. Near Sertar in western Sichuan, within the Tibetan cultural region of Kham, Larung Gar sits at nearly 4,000 meters and dates to 1980. Founded by Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, the institute became a major center of Tibetan Buddhist study, drawing monks, nuns, and lay students into the Nyingma tradition. The residences crowded the slopes because learning had to remain close to ritual, assembly, and communal study. Belief determined the settlement plan. That density carried a hard price. Fire access, sanitation, heating, waste, water, and movement over icy paths all had to work inside steep, compressed terrain. At this altitude, devotion is also logistics. Water must be moved uphill or carried, warmth must be held, and narrow paths must remain usable through snow and severe cold. Inside the halls, education demands years of philosophy, logic, debate, scripture, ritual, memorization, and meditation. The mind follows a discipline as strict as the terrain. After dark, illuminated buildings expose the true scale. This is not a cluster of retreats, but an entire town organized around study. Yet the red roofs do not tell the whole story. Since the middle of the last decade, government-led restructuring and population controls have cleared large housing sections and required many residents to leave. Crowded roofs and cleared slopes must be read together. One records devotion, the other how decisively state authority can reshape a religious community. What holds my attention is how ordinary the work behind this vast place remains. Walking to class, reciting a text, heating a room, repeating the work tomorrow. Daily study can sustain a religious community, but it cannot by itself protect the homes and population that make such study possible. Peach orchards spread beneath snow-covered peaks, yet Nyingchi's hardest work is hidden inside its most famous spring image. Deep river valleys in southeastern Tibet catch monsoon moisture, making the region greener and more forested than the high, dry plateau farther west. Villages occupy cultivable benches between rivers and steep mountain walls. Houses, fields, orchards, irrigation channels, and access roads must share the same limited ground. The blossom season draws attention, but fruit demands a long cycle of household discipline. Trees need pruning, soil care, pollination, harvesting, and transport to market. Depending on altitude and local conditions, farmers also grow highland barley, wheat, rapeseed, potatoes, vegetables, and fruit. The farm calendar therefore reaches well beyond the weeks of blossom. Bright turquoise and blue metal roofs record another kind of labor, adapting homes to rain and snow. Newer materials shed both efficiently and can demand less maintenance than some older roofs. Across the valley, those roofs mark recent investment. Families alter village architecture while keeping fields and orchards in use. Improved highways bring produce closer to markets and open guest houses, construction work, and seasonal tourism, especially during blossom festivals. Faster access creates income, then presses on farmland, waste services, and village architecture. This is the tension I keep returning to. Connection gives households more choices, but each new road also changes the ground those choices depend on. Steep terrain still sets the limit. Landslides, erosion, earthquakes, and road closures can interrupt movement. Rivers can isolate communities when bridges fail. Blossom lasts a few weeks. The harder measure is whether families can keep orchards, channels, fields, and homes working after tourists leave. Longji reduces a monumental landscape to its narrowest unit. One edge, one channel, one family, deciding whether to farm again. Across Longsheng County, north of Guilin, Zhuang and Yao communities built the linked Longji terraces over centuries. Stone and packed earth walls hold each strip. Their strength comes from narrow edges maintained one by hand. Water is the real engine. It drops from forested ridges through channels, crosses one plot, then feeds the next, binding woodland, field, and village into one working structure. That chain leaves little room for neglect. A blocked channel can leave lower plots dry, while heavy rain can breach walls and strip soil from the slope. Farming here is an annual cycle of precise labor. Clear the channels, reinforce the banks, flood the soil, transplant seedlings, control weeds, and share water between neighbors. Steep footpaths keep large machines out of much of the terrain. Hand tools and small equipment still carry work that flat farmland would hand to engines. The calendar exposes every stage of that labor. Spring water turns the fields reflective. Summer growth fills them green. Autumn brings ripened rice. Cutting reveals the constructed lines again. Tourism supports guest houses, restaurants, cable cars, transport, guides, and performances. It brings income beyond rice, but can pull labor from farming and reshape customs for a schedule. The paradox is hard and simple. The landscape earns money because it is maintained, yet new income can reduce the hands available to maintain it. From Bhutan's dzongs to Longji's paddies, public identity endures only while ordinary work remains possible and worth passing on. Cold wind and thin air put Litang's pastoral economy under pressure. The horse festival makes that economy visible. Litang's grasslands have only a short growing season, yet they support yak, sheep, and the horses that once linked camps, monasteries, markets, and distant grazing grounds. Racing did not begin as staged entertainment. A rider's speed and balance once determined whether people, supplies, and animals could cross this hard country. In summer, the grassland can become a temporary town. Tents form short-lived neighborhoods where families cook, tether animals, repair equipment, trade, and prepare for competition. That matters because the festival does not separate culture from labor. The same household skills that sustain pastoral life also build its public stage. Prayer flags around trees and poles place every race inside a Buddhist landscape. Nearby herds expose the economic base beneath the ceremony. Traditional clothing, music, mounted displays, and shared meals make Kham identity visible at full scale. Yet its strength begins in smaller acts: feeding animals, maintaining tack, preparing food, and organizing the family camp. No single schedule defines every camp, and festival formats can change. That flexibility is not weakness. It is how practice adjusts without surrendering its core. Beyond the tents, the modern G318 highway pushes another rhythm across Litang. Goods, tourists, motorcycles, construction, and quicker links to Chinese cities now move beside migrating herds. Pastoral households must absorb shifting grazing policies, market prices, schooling demands, and concern over declining grassland. Younger residents move between pastoral and urban economies, carrying identity across both. When the races end, the test continues in quieter work. Unsaddling horses, mending gear, feeding families, and deciding whether pastoral life can support another season. These green steps are not natural contours. Households cut them to hold water, soil, and crops on the mountain. At the southeastern edge of the Tibetan plateau, terraces trace the contours. Stone and timber houses claim stable ground, and forest remains where slopes are too steep or wet to farm. This is northwestern Yunnan, where the Hengduan Mountains break the plateau into steep ranges and deep river valleys. Every usable strip of earth has limits set by gradient, water, frost, and rain. Terrace walls slow runoff and trap soil, creating narrow level plots where none existed before. Heavy rain, frost, livestock, and small landslides damage that work, so the walls demand repeated repair. Water comes through channels fed by springs and mountain streams. A blockage upstream can reach every household below, turning maintenance into a shared duty rather than a private choice. Elevation then dictates the food. Barley, buckwheat, potatoes, maize, and vegetables can hold the cooler slopes. Rice belongs to lower, warmer valleys with enough water and a long enough season. Animals bind the farm together. Cattle, yak hybrids, pigs, or poultry can supply manure, transport dairy and household food, linking the field, storeroom, and kitchen. The houses carry the same logic. Local stone and timber resist cold and store grain and fodder, while Yunnan's stronger monsoon keeps these terraces greener than much of the central plateau. New roads cut the old isolation. They improve access to schools, healthcare, markets, and building materials. But they can also disturb slopes, draw labor away, and speed the replacement of demanding farm work. The view stays green only while Tibetan households clear channels, rebuild terrace walls, manage forest, and keep soil and water working season after season. An 8,000-meter giant rises above a world kept functioning by footpaths, bridge repairs, and household labor. Manaslu, the world's 8th highest mountain, anchors a protected region of roughly 1,600 square kilometers. The main circuit follows the Budi Gandaki upstream, climbing from humid valleys into narrow gorges, conifer forest, high pasture, and Tibetan Buddhist settlements. By the time it reaches Larkya La, the trail stands more than 5,000 meters above sea level. That climb compresses entire ways of living into a few days of altitude. Rice, millet, and maize yield to barley, potatoes, livestock, trade, and supplies carried by mule or porter. Roads cannot command every slope here. Weather, rockfall, snow, damaged bridges, and monsoon landslides can cut the route, so local knowledge decides when people, animals, food, and fuel can move. The 2015 earthquake severely damaged parts of the region. Its aftermath exposed a hard truth. Mountain life depends not only on houses, but on paths, walls, and crossings repaired again and again. Above the villages, glaciers and snowfields feed the streams. Rising temperatures also alter the hazards, while cloud across Manaslu can warn of a fast weather shift rather than hide a view. Yet the route carries more than cargo. Mani walls, chortens, monasteries, prayer flags, and roadside shrines place religious tradition along the working trail. What strikes me is the scale of that discipline. Faith does not sit apart from work. Shrines and prayer flags occupy the same route used by farmers, animal handlers, porters, and trekking crews. Restricted access requires permits and organized travel. That control limits pressure while directing income toward guides, lodges, animal handlers, and local services. At Manaslu, culture holds because labor, faith, and family duty keep the same vulnerable trail open. Kathmandu concentrates the film's pressures. A city shaped around courtyards and foot traffic must force a metropolitan load through streets that never widened. Historic Nuar settlements and former royal centers have fused with concrete neighborhoods, while migration drives housing from old fields toward the valley hills. The basin gives Kathmandu its form and traps its pressure. Exhaust, road dust, kiln emissions, and seasonal smoke collect beneath ridges that restrict airflow. At street level, buses, motorcycles, taxis, vendors, pedestrians, and construction crews compete for the same narrow ground. Above them, power and communication cables multiply faster than crews can reorder them. This apparent disorder is not random. It is the physical record of families adding floors, shopkeepers claiming every frontage, and utilities chasing growth after it has already arrived. I keep returning to the smaller machinery behind the city. Tanks, pumps, wells, and water deliveries. Uneven supply turns each rooftop and household into part of Kathmandu's infrastructure. The weather tightens that burden. Monsoon rain can overwhelm drains and expose weak waste collection. The dry season brings heavier dust and sharper water shortages. Then there is the strain of time. The earthquake of 2015 damaged homes, temples, and public buildings, leaving reconstruction beside fresh commercial growth. Yet older courtyards, brick houses, shrines, markets, and workshops still preserve a neighborhood order older than motor traffic. They keep commerce, household duty, and sacred space within the same tight blocks. That matters because continuity here does not survive through isolation. It survives by absorbing more people, more vehicles, and more demand without surrendering every older pattern. Kathmandu shows what cultural endurance looks like under urban pressure. Not a frozen past, but families and sacred places carrying daily duty through dust, shortage, rebuilding, and relentless growth. A rice field should be flat. Around Sapa, households made entire mountains obey that rule. In the Huanglian Sun Range near the Chinese border, terrace walls turn steep inclines into narrow plots that hold shallow soil and wet rice. Hmong, Red Dao, Jie, Te, and other communities shaped different slopes with distinct dress and household traditions. Those identities are not interchangeable. The engineering begins with gravity. Springs and mountain streams enter small channels. One plot feeds the next, and each wall slows runoff before it strips soil downhill. No terrace survives on design alone. Families repair walls, guide water, raise seedlings, transplant rice, weed fields, and harvest by the monsoon calendar. Water buffalo still plow where slopes permit, because many machines cannot grip or turn here. Human labor closes the gap. The fields change as the labor changes. Reflective water during preparation, bright green after planting, deeper green in summer, then gold near harvest. Fog brings moisture, but it can hide paths. Heavy rain can breach walls, trigger landslides, and drive sediment into every lower plot. A failure high on the slope does not stay local. Water and sediment carry the loss into household plots below. Tourism adds income through homestays, guiding, transport, restaurants, and crafts. New construction also consumes fields and strains water and waste services. The deeper pressure is whether younger households can make farming worth the labor. Without that choice, inherited walls begin to fail. What stands out to me is practical strength. Food, dress, craft, and family work preserve identity because they are used. Sapa's terraces remain infrastructure only, while younger households judge the labor worth inheriting. Otherwise, water finds every abandoned seam. Traffic, haze, and a swelling city press against a white dome that has held this hill for more than 15 centuries. Swayambhunath stands west of central Kathmandu, with inscriptions proving that this wooded height was already sacred during the Lichavi period. Buddhist tradition reaches further back, to a lotus appearing when the Kathmandu Valley was imagined as a lake. History and belief meet here without needing to cancel each other. At the center, the dome represents the world. Above it, painted eyes signal awakened awareness, fixed beneath a gilded tower visible across the valley. 13 rising levels are commonly linked to stages toward enlightenment. The structure does not merely shelter worship, it gives belief a physical order. Pilgrims walk clockwise, turn prayer wheels, recite mantras, light butter lamps, and place offerings. Faith survives because hands keep doing the work. I keep returning to that plain fact. Monumental architecture carries authority, but repeated human routines supply its force. Vajrayana Buddhist shrines stand beside Hindu deities and later monasteries. Newar, Tibetan Buddhist, and Hindu traditions overlap within one working sacred complex. Rhesus macaques explain the familiar name, the Monkey Temple. They also bring practical pressure around food, waste, and the behavior of visitors. The hill looks across dense neighborhoods and traffic corridors to the valley rim. Urban expansion and pollution now crowd the same horizon as prayer. The ground adds another test. Buildings damaged in the earthquake of 2015 were repaired, but seismic risk remains part of every preservation decision. Swayambhunath's endurance can be heard in wheels turning and seen in repaired walls. Neither worship nor masonry survives here without the other. Bhutan's strength does not rest on isolation. It rests on repetition. Cloth is wrapped in a known way. Food passes across the same table. Children learn the prayer, the doorway, and the work expected at home. These acts appear modest beside a dzong or a Himalayan wall, but they carry more weight. Stone can be repaired by builders. A living tradition survives only when families practice it again the next morning. I take one lesson from this. Modern life rarely erases culture through open rejection. More often, convenience and speed wear it thin. Bhutan offers a harder answer. Keep faith useful. Keep family work shared. Keep tradition in the hands. In an age of rapid movement, cultural power belongs to communities that renew themselves at home. If this portrait changed how you see cultural strength, continue with stories that examine the daily labor of keeping faith, family, and place joined under pressure across a changing world.